Hello, people from around the universe! I am your host, the Italian Ace, and today I would like to talk to you about why Pokemon Scarlet and Violet might just be the perfect game to follow Pokemon Legends Arceus. So first, I should probably tell you what exactly I mean when I say that this is the perfect game to follow such a masterpiece, honestly, like Legends Arceus. And obviously, I'm not talking about this being just as good, if not better, than that game because, well, for one, Scarlet and Violet has not come out yet. And for two, that would come down to personal preference. No, instead, what I'm trying to say is that I think Game Freak is using both Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet as kind of a combined package deal to figure out where to take the Pokemon franchise to next. Now, obviously, I could be completely wrong about this, but I do believe there might be some truth to what I'm about to say. So, let's just get into it. And of course, before we do that, cue my intro. So let's start this off with kind of a thought exercise, and that is, go back to before Legends Arceus came out. In fact, imagine we're in a world where Legends Arceus never gets announced and never gets released. Do you really think that the new games, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, would look the same as they do now? What I mean by this is, do you really think they would be trying so many different mechanics in these games that just seemingly are coming out of nowhere when they've had such a successful formula that's carried them through for years? I personally don't think that would be the case. Now, don't get me wrong. Obviously, Scarlet and Violet would still have the new generational gimmick, and they would have new Pokemon, new regional forms, and maybe something extra on top, like, let's say, the paradox forms that they're introducing for these games. However, I don't believe that we would be getting all of these new features that Pokemon seems to be pushing with Scarlet and Violet if not for the release of Legends Arceus beforehand. And let me elaborate on that a little bit, because obviously I'm not trying to say that Game Freak saw how successful Legends Arceus was and then made Scarlet and Violet because of it. I mean, Scarlet and Violet were probably almost completely done production-wise by the time Legends Arceus came out, so that wouldn't make any sense. What I'm trying to say instead is that Game Freak doesn't want to become one of those companies that releases the same product over and over and over again. And I know this might sound silly when the main series Pokemon games haven't really changed in their formula since the beginning, but I mean, that's exactly the point. Game Freak is realizing that they need to innovate something in order to keep Pokemon on the level of popularity that it is at right now. And at the same time, they can't compromise the immediate success of the games, which could happen if you just try to change everything all at once. So what's the solution? Well, how about releasing two games in the same year that both try out different new mechanics, and some of the same ones, to see which ones fans like the most, and then improve on them and take them into the next games so that they can start to revolutionize the Pokemon formula without us really realizing it. Or I guess a better way of saying that would be, not that we're not realizing that they're changing the game, but that we're not going to get upset about them changing the game because it's not happening all at once. I mean, just think back to Sword and Shield and the whole National Dex debacle that happened. Imagine if that happened with multiple features of the new game. You really risk just alienating a part of your audience, and that's obviously not great for business. But instead, if you kind of split off different ideas between the two new games that are coming out basically back to back, you can get a lot of feedback from the fans and then implement them for the upcoming new Pokemon games. And by this, I don't mean the other Gen 9 games. I think that would be too short of a time for them to implement all of the feedback. I'm more so talking about Gen 10, which, I mean, is 3 years away, but it's gonna happen, and I think Game Freak wants to make sure that when that does come out, it not only feels like a fresh Pokemon game, but also one that has a lot of features that they know all of us old school Pokemon fans and new Pokemon fans will enjoy. And just to help kind of corroborate this point, let's talk about some of the new features, mechanics, concepts, or whatever that Game Freak has introduced between Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet. So for one, Legends Arceus just had completely new battle mechanics. I mean, the rapid and strong style were something most people probably never even thought of, or if they did, they didn't expect Game Freak to actually implement them in the game. They also had new status conditions, which I don't know if they're ever gonna return to like the classic Pokemon games, but they might. And they had a completely new way to catch Pokemon, which personally I hope they implement in every single Pokemon game going forward, because it's just so much more fun to be able to sneak around and just throw a Pokeball than it is to always have to run into the Pokemon and then see if that Pokemon is either shiny or has the nature you want, if it's something that like pops up, like Intimidate or whatever, battle it, whittle it down, and then catch it. This way, you can catch a lot more Pokemon a lot more quickly, and it's also a lot more fun. So, I really hope that they bring that back. But anyway, they introduced so much new stuff in Legends Arceus, and most of it, I would say, was incredibly well received. I mean, I think most people, myself included, love the idea of Alpha Pokemon, for example. Or even Noble Pokemon, which might only be restricted to the Legends series, but we'll see. But honestly, this almost semi-quasi open world concept, which is obviously getting expanded in Scarlet and Violet. And I say almost open world because to me, Legends Arceus just felt like it was open world. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I always thought that was the case. But I know a lot of people are gonna be very technical with this and be like, well, you had to go through a central area, so technically it's not open world. Okay, yeah, whatever, who cares? It's an open world game, let's just be honest here, right? Oh, you have to go through Jubilee City? Oh my gosh! Whatever shall we do? Like, come on, guys, just because you have to go through the village every single time. That's, yes, technically it takes it out of the category, but to me it seemed like a very obvious testing ground for a fully open world Pokemon game. And speaking of, guess what they're doing with their very next release? A fully open world Pokemon game. I mean, that's no coincidence. Basically, I think that they were testing out 2 different ways to implement this open world formula, which again, I know Legends Arceus technically is not that, and then seeing which one we prefer. Because maybe when they release Scarlet and Violet, people will prefer having a central hub of sorts, and then that is what Game Freak will go forward with. Or maybe, and I think this is more likely, people will love that you can just go everywhere in an open world style game. You know? I mean, to me, it seems like a win-win because they've kind of covered both of their bases and they'll be able to get our feedback before making the new game that would be implementing this feature. But being open world is not the only thing that Scarlet and Violet has introduced. I mean, the new generational gimmick of terastallizing, to me, is the craziest one yet. Because, yes, Megas boost your stats and maybe change your ability, and Gigantamax/Dynamaxing also either boosts your HP and gives you stronger moves, and or gives you a new signature move with a strong effect. And Z-moves are basically a incredibly strong move with potentially a devastating effect, but you only get it the one time per battle. But changing your type, like just straight up, is crazy. I mean, not only do you get an extra stab boost on top of your normal one when you do this, but you can just become a completely different type Pokemon, which I am still worried about the competitive balance, but taking that aside for a second, that's a very bold move for Game Freak to introduce. And even though, again, it might not work out competitively, I hope it does, but we'll see, it does open up some new possibilities story-wise. Just look at the gyms. The ace Pokemon for the grass gym is Sudowoodo, because it can now actually terrestrialize into a grass type. And I mentioned this in my trailer analysis, but they could do this with multiple Pokemon that always felt like they should have had this type, but never could because you're only limited to 2 types per Pokemon. You could finally have a Charizard be the ace Pokemon of a Dragon type gym, because he's actually going to become a Dragon type even without Mega Evolution. You could have Flygon be the ace Pokemon of a Bug type gym. The possibilities are not endless, but certainly there, and I think Game Freak had this kind of idea of introducing a new way for some main NPCs in the game to have their ace Pokemon still match their type. Of course, this very well could just be stuck in Gen 9 and nothing else, like most of the generational gimmicks, because only Mega Evolution ever made it past the gen it was introduced in. But we'll see. I hope it sticks around if it doesn't break competitive. If it breaks competitive, then throw it in the trash. I don't want to see this just completely ruin the competitive scene. Another big change that Pokemon, I think, just announced a couple days ago at the time of me recording this, is that you now can do automatic Pokemon battles to kind of speed the process along of you going through an Evil Team space, or maybe just doing random battles in the wild. And I mean, that seems pretty great to me, because after the 4th or 5th grunt in the classic Evil Team base final thing that you have to do in basically every single Pokemon game, it can start to drag a little bit. You're like, okay, yeah, there's like 10 more, great, awesome, this is fun. Yes. But now, all of those battles that were always really easy, let's be honest, are not skippable, but almost. And I'm sure that Pokemon will see what we think of this mechanic, because maybe it's not implemented perfectly, or maybe it is, we'll see. And then they'll try to improve on it so that it's even better next time around. And actually, Scarlet and Violet is even bringing back some of that Legends Arceus flair, with basically this game's version of Alpha Pokemon, which honestly I am super excited about, because those were maybe the most fun wild battles I've ever had in any Pokemon game. So bringing that back, that's a incredibly big plus for me. And at the same time, it's very obvious to me, and I think most people, that Scarlet and Violet is still just this testing ground for the open world Pokemon concept. I mean, just look at the way they're handling gyms, where it seems like no matter when you take a certain gym on, that gym leader's Pokemon's levels will not change, which I think most of us agree is not ideal. However, when Game Freak gets feedback from the community, which I'm sure many people will have many different ideas of how to do this, they will probably be able to kind of see which one is the most popular, or which 2 or 3 options are the most popular, because you never know how many we're going to come up with. Playtest them, hopefully, and then pick the best one, so that next time the gyms are going to be almost like in Pokemon Origins, you know? Where maybe it's not even just the level that changes for the gym leader based on when you take them on, but also the Pokemon that they have, and how many Pokemon that they have. I mean, that would be the best way to handle this, because it would still feel like there's a progression throughout, without really forcing you into picking a path of sorts, because yeah, you could take this gym on now, but really you should be taking this other one on, you know what I'm saying? And honestly, another thing that is not new per se, but is definitely implemented in a different way, is the involvement of the legendaries as ride Pokemon from, I'm guessing, very early on in the game. I mean, we've had ride Pokemon for a while, but the legendaries? And they can do everything, basically. I don't know, that seems very interesting to me. And while I don't think this will be coming back to other generations, unless they always make these legendaries that can kind of morph their shape and size almost to fit whatever vehicle you need, but it might be a hint as to what we can expect for ride Pokemon going forward. And hopefully they do something that combines this with the Legends Arceus way of doing ride Pokemon, because in my opinion that's the best that mechanic has ever been implemented. Oh, and speaking of ride Pokemon, do you remember all of those Legends Arceus challenges that you had to pop balloons? The hardest one of which was quite the pain? Well, now it seems like we're going to have races on our legendaries, which, I mean, that seems like Pokemon is trying to implement all these new things that you can have in the game that go beyond just the normal Pokemon RPG formula. And if they work, I think they're only gonna enhance the game and help it survive that little bit longer, or hopefully that lot of it longer, because I don't think Pokemon's going anywhere anytime soon, and I really hope that with these changes, that's only going to be all the more true. I mean, really, we're even going to have a multiplayer component for the actual story in this game, or at least that's what it looks like. We've never had that. The most multiplayer content that you had was Pokemon battles, which is the most important thing, but it's nice to have something else, you know? And I really think that Game Freak just is trying all of these new concepts between these two games so that they're not all piled on in the same entry and therefore running a higher risk of kind of alienating the audience, like I said before. And instead, they can use both Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet just to test the waters and then see what really works so that they can improve on that and evolve the franchise in the safest but also potentially most innovative way possible. I don't know, I'm just very excited about all of these new changes, and maybe I'm reading too much into it. I probably am, and half of these will just stay in this generation, if not more. But I mean, I can dream, right? Because nothing would be worse than Pokemon just becoming another FIFA or Call of Duty or whatever, where it's really just the same game, but with a new skin, you know? And I think Game Freak knows that people are starting to make those comparisons, and they're trying to avoid falling into that trap. But again, maybe I'm completely wrong and this is just a one-off thing. Although, I really don't think that is the case. But I think that will do it for this video. I could go on, but I'm also afraid that would make it redundant, so we'll end it right here. If you enjoyed this video, then please do leave a like, because YouTube wants that apparently, so that would be great. If you want to see more Pokemon content, especially for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, but also just in general, I do recommend subscribing. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you all in the next video. But until then, remember to follow the way of the Ace. See ya!